Why a strike on Iran's Bushehr nuclear plant could kill millions, but hold on, not in Iran. Imagine this, it's 3 a.m. on the Persian Gulf. A single missile slips through Iran's degraded air defense system and strikes the containment dome of Bushehr nuclear power plant. Within minutes, a VVER-1000 reactor holding around 72 tons of active nuclear fuel and 210 tons of spent fuel begins venting radioactive particles into the atmosphere. Within hours, the northwesterly winds over the Gulf do what they do every April. That means they blow towards Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia's eastern province. Within days, the 400 desalination plants in that particular region that provide up to 99% of drinking water to more than 60 million Gulf residents, they start shutting down. This is not the script of Hollywood movie. This is a scenario modeled by International Atomic Energy Agency, by Rostam's chief executive, by peer-reviewed studies in science and global security, and since March 2026 by every serious disaster management expert all over the world. Jai Hind, I am Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Satish Dhage, the defense and disaster management expert. I am a disaster management and defense analyst, and in the next 7 minutes, I am going to tell you exactly what would happen if Bushehr nuclear power plant is hit. 3 scenarios, 1 terrifying geography, and the question every government is avoiding. What will happen if Bushehr nuclear plant is hit? Let's begin. Let's get the facts right first. Without them, everything else is guesswork. That's why let's know the facts correctly to start with. Number 1. Bushehr 1 is a Russian-built VVER-1000 V446 pressurized water reactor which generates around 915 megawatt energy. The construction of this plant began under the Shah in 1975 with the help of German company Siemens. After the 1979 Iranian Islamic Revolution, the Siemens company walked out of this particular project. Iraq bombed the unfinished plant during the Iran-Iraq war. In year 1995, Russia's Rostam took over this particular project. The reactor finally went critical in May 2011. This was the chronology of events. Now, geography-wise, this nuclear plant sits at 28.83 degree north and 50.89 degree east on the Persian Gulf coast south of the city of Bushehr. 3 technical facts every viewer must know. Fact number 1. Bushehr holds approximately 282 tons of nuclear material, out of which 72 tons is active fuel in the core part and around 210 tons of spent fuel in the adjacent cooling pools. That spent fuel in some ways is more dangerous than the active core because this spent fuel lives outside the main containment structure of the nuclear power plant. Fact number 2. This reactor was designed to withstand a magnitude of around 8 earthquakes. It was not designed to withstand a modern bunker-busting munition which United States of America can use, or even a sustained military campaign. Fact number 3. Iran is the only country in the world operating a nuclear power reactor that is not a party to the Convention on Nuclear Safety. That means the international safety architecture has a hole in it, and Bushehr nuclear power plant sits inside that particular hole. Here is the detailed most competitors related with this particular issue they are missing. As of April 5, 2026, the Bushehr nuclear site has already been hit 4 times during the United States of America Israel-Iran war. At least 1 plant employee has been killed during these strikes. Rostam has evacuated 198 Russian technicians. The International Atomic Energy Agency, it has reported no radiation spike yet, but that word "yet" is doing an enormous amount of work. Rostam CEO Alexei Likachev publicly warned that any serious accident related to Bushehr nuclear plant would be, and I quote, at least regional in scale, and that none of the parties to the conflict would avoid exposure. On April 4th, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi made a statement so chilling that most Iranian media failed to grasp its full meaning. He said, radioactive fallout from Bushehr nuclear plant would end life in GCC capitals, not Tehran. That means it won't be restricted to Tehran only, Iran only. It will destroy the Gulf Cooperation Council nations, that means the Arab nations. That was not a threat. It was meteorology weaponized as a deterrence. To understand Foreign Minister Araghchi's statements, look at a map. Bushehr sits just 281 kilometers from Kuwait city, 301 kilometers from Manama, 408 kilometers from Doha. It sits 1200 kilometers from Tehran. Tehran is inland, shielded by the Zagros mountains, and critically it is upwind. That means if Bushehr nuclear plant is hit, rather than Tehran, other Arab nations' capitals, they would be damaged, they would be affected. The prevailing winds in this particular region blow from northwest to southeast. That means contamination from Bushehr does not go to Iran, it goes to its Arab neighbors. Now add the Persian Gulf itself to the picture. The Gulf is a semi-enclosed, shallow body of water. Average depth is just 50 meters. Water residence time is 3 to 5 years. That means any radioactive material entering Gulf waters does not flush out quickly. It circulates, it concentrates, it persists. And sitting along the coastline are the crown jewels of Gulf civilization. That means more than 400 desalination plants producing 22 million cubic meters of fresh water every day, which is very much essential for the population of this Arab nation. Qatar gets 99% of its drinking water from these desalination plants. Kuwait and Bahrain 90%, UAE up to 80%, Saudi Arabia 50% overall, but near 100% in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. That means these Gulf nations are totally dependent for their basic necessity of water, drinking water, on these desalination plants, and these desalination plants would be affected if Bushehr nuclear power plant is hit. Strategic water reserves across the GCC, roughly 1 week. This is why Bushehr is unlike any other nuclear power plant on the earth. As a disaster management analyst, I break every worst case into model scenarios. So here are 3 scenarios. Scenario A, contained damage, which is most likely. A conventional missile strike hits outer structure, that means the turbine hall, the cooling infrastructure, the administrative buildings of this Bushehr nuclear power plant. Containment holds, the reactor shuts down on emergency protocols. So what would be the outcome? Localized radiation exposure within the plant perimeter. Bushehr city of 2.5 lakh people placed under protective action. Global oil prices spike another 10 to 15% on this fear alone. This is essentially what has happened 4 times already when Bushehr nuclear power plant was tried to be hit. Let's see the another scenario. Scenario B, scenario Bravo, spent fuel pool fire, which is of moderate intensity. Imagine this missile strike damages the spent fuel cooling system. Cooling water boils off. Fuel assemblies are exposed to air. A zirconium fire begins. This is very critical. A spent fuel fire releases contamination at lower altitude than a reactor explosion. That means the plum stays near ground level and the deposits heavily on the Gulf surface. So what would be the outcome of this? Cesium-137 and iodine-131 enter the atmosphere. Peer-reviewed modeling in science and global security shows the most affected cities would be Shiraz, Kuwait, Bushehr, and Awaz. Desalination plants across the northern Gulf forced into emergency shutdown. Fishing banned fishing banned across Arabian waters because of this contamination. Tens of billions of dollars in economic damage will happen within just the period of 1 month. Scenario C, containment breach, which would be considered as the nightmare. A direct missile strike or drone strike on the reactor building combined with cooling failure leads to partial or full core meltdown and the rupture of the primary containment. This is Chernobyl scale release into a shallow, semi-enclosed sea, ringed by 60 million people whose drinking water comes out of that particular sea. So what would be the outcome of this scenario? Airborne plum renders Kuwait city, Manama, Doha partially or fully uninhabitable for months to years. Desalination intake zones, they would be contaminated with cesium-137, whose half-life is around 30 years. Gulf currents transport these radionuclides to Bahrain and Kuwait within 15 days of this particular incident. 22 million cubic meters per day of desalinated water, the invisible backbone of Gulf civilization. So this desalinated water would be collapsed. Strait of Hormuz oil transit halts permanently. Global oil at $200 per barrel plus within a week's time. Largest civilian evacuation in modern history has to be done. In the language of disaster management, this is a category 6 compound catastrophe. Nuclear, environmental, economic, geopolitical, humanitarian, all of these complications will happen at once. You may be thinking, this is a Gulf problem. It's not our problem. India has approximately 1 crore citizens living and working across the GCC. We have to remember this. A category 6 event at Bushehr nuclear plant would trigger an evacuation 50 times larger than the 1990 Kuwait airlift. The largest civilian evacuation in human history which was done in 1990, 6 times more than that. Such kind of evacuation plan one has to make. Our current Ministry of External Affairs contingency planning is not designed for such a huge scale evacuation operation. Point number 2. Indian fishing fleets operate across the Arabian Sea. Contaminated Gulf waters flushing through Hormuz would make this fishing catch unsafe for export and domestic consumption for a number of years. Point number 3. Food and fertilizer imports would be hampered. The Gulf supplies over 30% of global urea. A nuclear shutdown in the region would compound an already fragile global food system and economic system. Point number 4. Summer monsoon wind patterns. Depending on the month of the event, fallout particles, these radiation particles, could reach India's western coast. The probability is low, but theoretically that possibility is still there. The consequence, if it happens, would be catastrophic. India is not a bystander in this particular crisis. We are a downstream stakeholders. So, there must be 4 priorities, all urgent. Priority number 1. Protect nuclear facilities under international law. The Geneva Convention's Additional Protocol 1, Article 56 of this Geneva Convention, it already prohibits attacks on nuclear stations. It is routinely ignored. The Zaporizhzhia precedent in Ukraine showed that sustained diplomatic pressure can create de facto ceasefires around at least these nuclear sites. The same must apply to Bushehr nuclear plant also. Immediately, that action has to be done. Point number 2, action number 2. An International Atomic Energy Agency enforced safety zone. A 30-kilometer demilitarized buffer with international monitoring for the duration of hostilities. This is not pro-Iran. This is pro-civilization. Point number 3. GCC Regional Nuclear Emergency Framework. As of today, no Gulf state has publicly released a civilian nuclear evacuation plan. 6 countries with combined population of 60 million, they are flying blind. Point number 4. India's specific contingency. The Ministry of External Affairs, National Disaster Management Authority, and Indian Navy must jointly exercise a Bushehr worst case evacuation plan for 1 crore Indians, not as a paper drill, as a live exercise. Here is the truth every disaster management expert knows. Nuclear plants are designed to withstand earthquakes, tsunamis, and terrorist attacks. They are not designed to withstand these modern warfare tactics. Bushehr is not just Iran's problem. It is the Gulf's problem. It is India's problem. And ultimately, it is world's and humanitarian problem. If this breakdown mattered to you, like, subscribe, and share this particular video on Military Mentor Dr. Satish. Drop your view in the comments. Should nuclear sites be declared permanently demilitarized? The way hospitals are considered under the Geneva Conventions? Give your opinion through your comments. Till that particular moment, thank you. Jai Hind.